At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's Chikondi. Let's begin. The only thing more offensive than Sovereign Tull's face was the sound it made when it attempted to communicate. On the main observation screen in the Chimera Operations Center, a colossal cavern of repurposed freighter hulls and the strained quiet of 1,000 held breaths buried miles beneath Europa's ice, the Vox Sovereign's features were a masterpiece of condescending pity. Its skin, the color and texture of polished granite, was stretched taut over a skull that seemed to have too many joints. Its primary eyes were milky, sightless orbs, but the thermal pits beneath them flared with a deep, contemptuous warmth as it surveyed its human audience. Its voice, a series of dry, rattling clicks and deep subsonic pulses filtered through 1,000 layers of translation software, echoed across the entire Sol system. It was a broadcast on every channel, the ultimate final warning from a being that viewed humanity as a particularly stubborn mold problem. The Sovereign, speaking from the bridge of its flagship light minutes away, gestured with a three-jointed limb toward a tactical overlay. It dissected the pathetic remnants of the United Sol Defense Fleet, their crude plasma bolts splashing against the Vox ships like angry, impotent fireworks. The Vox ships hung in the blackness over Earth, a string of malevolent pearls, untouched and wholly unimpressed.
Your strategies are a chaotic assortment of reactive flailing,
Tull's translated voice droned, the thermal pits beneath its eyes flaring brighter, the Vox equivalent of a smirk.
Your technology is a relic, a jumble of competing standards and explosive power sources. You possess no coherent energy deflection. You have no focused energy projection.
It paused for effect, letting the stillness hang over a terrified solar system. A dry, rattling click echoed from deep in its thorax, a Vox chuckle.
You don't even have coil guns.
Mads Kaz, his face a ghostly mask in the blue glow of his console, didn't flinch. He never looked up. He just took a long, slow sip of coffee from a chipped ceramic mug that read, "World's Most Tolerable Engineer." The coffee was 3 days old, with the consistency of engine sludge, but it was the only thing preventing his frayed neurons from staging a full-scale mutiny. He traded a grim, silent look with Commander Izoida Voronova, who stood beside him, her posture so rigid it seemed to defy gravity. She watched the real-time feed of Tull's sneering face, a luxury afforded by one useful piece of tech they'd salvaged from a wrecked Vox Scout a year ago, a sympathetic comm unit. The subspace communicator allowed them to see the enemy's smugness without the 43-minute light speed delay, a constant, infuriating reminder of their disadvantage. Her expression was a carefully constructed void, but her fingers drummed a frantic, silent rhythm against the back of his chair. Behind them, bolted to a bulkhead and jury-rigged with enough exposed wiring to electrocute a small moon, a massive countdown timer hit T-minus 60 seconds. "All power from the Armstrong grid to the primary capacitors!" Mads' voice, raw from sleeplessness and caffeine, cut through the tense hum of the operations center. "And I mean all of it! If the lights don't dim on Mars, you're not trying hard enough!" He became a dervish of motion, his hands moving with frantic purpose. His left hand keyed a bypass command that sent a cascade of ruby-red error messages screaming across the screen, which he dismissed with a contemptuous flick. His right flipped a row of heavy physical switches for the coolant shunts. This was not a clean, pre-programmed launch sequence. This was a knife fight with physics in a dark alley. He manually shunted terawatts of raw power, ignoring dozens of safety warnings written by engineers who had the luxury of believing their creations wouldn't one day be used to save their entire species. With every overridden alert, he muttered a new curse aimed at the long-dead designers of the original industrial mass driver. "Structural integrity of a pre-war paperclip, I swear!" he growled, forcing a magnetic containment field to 10 times its rated capacity. The proximity alarm shrieked as the field bulged, momentarily warping the bulkhead a foot away.
Did they build this thing on a dare?
A high-pitched, tooth-rattling whine began to fill the room, a sound that vibrated deep in the bones. The air grew thick with the sharp sting of ionized helium and the acrid tang of overloaded capacitors. On secondary screens, external camera feeds revealed the Chimera for what it truly was, not a weapon, but a wound carved into Europa's crust. It was a miles-long trench of raw functionality, lined with scavenged maglev rails anchored deep into the moon's silicate mantle. Sparks the size of ground cars erupted from overloaded power conduits that groaned and buckled under a strain they were never meant to endure.
Target's holding its position.
Gibbert's voice crackled over the comms, a beacon of unnerving calm in the furious interlocking ballet of the launch prep. He was out there in the black, a lone firefly in his scout ship, the Scarlet Halo.
They're fat, dumb, and happy, sitting right in the sweet spot for the Jupiter slingshot. Targeting solution is locked. Computers accounted for the light lag and their projected drift. It's a hell of a math problem, but the light's green.
Copy that, Gibbert. Verona's voice was clipped, a diamond-hard counterpoint to Mad's frantic energy. Maintain observation. On our signal, get clear.
You don't have to tell me twice, Commander, Gibbert replied. I plan on being several million kilometers away and complaining about the catering when the fireworks start.
Mad's hand hovered over the firing mechanism. It was not a sleek, recessed button. It was a massive, greasy, yellow and black striped lever assembly, a brutal piece of machinery cannibalized from an old asteroid cracking rig. The metal felt gritty with industrial lubricant, scored by a dozen frantic tests. He gripped the cold, heavy handle, the vibrations of the charging weapon traveling up his arm, making his teeth hum. 10 seconds, Verona announced, her eyes fixed on the main screen. The whine climbed into a register that was felt more than heard. The lights in the operations center flickered violently, then held. 5, 4... Mad's knuckles were bone white. He felt the weight of 8 billion lives on his shoulders. He thought for a fleeting, absurd moment about his workshop, about the half-finished violin on his workbench, about a quiet life that no longer existed. 3, 2... He took a breath that tasted of burnt electronics and stale coffee.
Firing on my mark,
he said, his voice surprisingly steady.
Mark.
Mads threw the lever. It took his entire body weight to move it, the mechanism engaging with a deafening metallic clang that echoed through the room like a hammer blow from God. The entire moon of Europa shuddered. It was not a tremor. It was a deep, bone-jarring tectonic groan, as if the moon itself cried out in protest. On the surface, fissures miles long raced across the ice shelf, venting plumes of subsurface water vapor into the vacuum. The recoil from a single shot was rewriting the moon's geology. In the dead, absolute stillness of space, a 20-ton slug of tungsten-cored asteroid erupted from the trench. It was an ugly, brutal piece of rock, an insult to physics. It was wrapped in a volatile cage of scavenged Voc capacitor banks, energy arcing between the pylons in silent, angry jolts, a monstrous single-use bomb strapped to a bullet. It hurtled outward, then bent sharply as it was caught by Jupiter's immense gravity well. The gas giant acted as a cosmic catapult, whipping the projectile around and flinging it back toward the Voc fleet at a speed that made a mockery of conventional propulsion. Sovereign Tull was still broadcasting, a self-satisfied ripple of warmth in its thermal pits as it began to list the terms of humanity's surrender.
Your cultural artifacts will be preserved for study. Your population centers will be reorganized for optimal aesthetic harmony.
The projectile screamed past its fleet, a kilometer off the port bow of the Sovereign's flagship. It never touched a single ship. As it passed the midpoint of their arrangement, the capacitor banks discharged. A single, silent, omnidirectional wave of pure electromagnetic force erupted from the slug. A tidal wave of raw energy washed over the Voc fleet. Their elegant shields, tuned to dissipate the focused energy of a laser or plasma bolt, were hit across their entire surface at the exact same instant. They flared a brilliant rainbow of colors. They did not break. They did not fail. They resonated, the EM wave causing their own projectors to overload in a catastrophic feedback loop. Then they shattered into trillions of motes, a silent explosion of violent and viridian dust caught in a sunbeam. The hulls beneath, designed for elegance and uninterested in withstanding physical impacts, crumpled like foil in a child's fist. Reactors, suddenly unsupported by their containment fields, breached. Half the Vok fleet vanished. One moment, 24 pristine, arrogant vessels occupied the space above Earth. The next, a rapid expanding cloud of incandescent gas and shattered metal filled their place. A chain reaction of silent, blinding explosions painted the darkness. On the main observation screen, Tull's smug expression dissolved, replaced by a flash of sheer, uncomprehending terror in its heat-sensing pits. Its jaw opened, but before any sound could emerge, its feed cut to a blizzard of static. The operations center was utterly still. The only sound was the frantic ticking of the overloaded systems cooling down. Every crew member, every technician, every soldier stared at the screen in utter reverent awe. Mads let out a shaky, triumphant breath that fogged the air in front of him.
Well,
He said, slumping back into his chair.
that was inelegant as hell.
The days following what the hastily assembled USDF High Command dubbed the Europa Gambit were a strange cocktail of elation and cold, creeping dread. The remaining Vok ships had not waited for a second invitation. They either fled the system at emergency warp or were picked off by the handful of human destroyers that had survived the initial blockade. The immediate threat was gone. The new threat was infinitely larger. Voronova stood before the main strategic map, which no longer showed enemy ship positions. Instead, it displayed a chaotic web of intercepted galactic communications, frantic, terrified messages from the retreating Vok fleet, a grainy, low-resolution recording of Tull's armada being erased from existence had already spread like a contagion through every known network.
"Congratulations, Mads,"
Vorona said, her voice grim. She gestured at the screen, at the panicked alien script scrolling past.
"You've turned us from an isolated species using combustion engines into the galaxy's most terrifying ghost story."
She brought up another feed. It was from a mercenary guild's public bounty board. A fortune in refined heavy metals was offered for any concrete intelligence on the Sol Shield Breaker. Rival empires, who had been content to watch the Vok hegemony conduct its tedious pest control, now debated intervention. The Vok themselves were marshalling a force for pure extermination.
"They think we have a whole fleet of these things,"
Vorona continued, her gaze hard.
"They think Chimera is just one of many. They can't conceive that a species they deemed pre-industrial could build a single weapon capable of that."
Mads ran a hand through his already disastrous hair.
Great, we kicked the hornet's nest, and now all we have is one shoe.
"Worse,"
she said, turning to face him.
"We don't even have the shoe anymore."
The short-lived celebration died the moment Mads' first diagnostic report came back. It was not a report. It was a digital obituary, a sea of red alerts and critical failure warnings.
It's like firing a cannon made of glass,
he explained to Voronova and the senior staff, gesturing at the schematic of the Chimera that was mostly blinking red icons.
That shot was a 1 in a million confluence of desperation and dumb luck.
We pushed a blast of power through the system so far beyond what the scavenged parts were designed for, it's a miracle the entire moon didn't turn to plasma. He pointed to a specific component on the diagram.
Half the primary capacitors are fried. They look like lumps of charcoal. The magnetic conduits are warped. But this is the killer.
He highlighted the main power converter. A massive crack snaked across the component's casing.
It fractured. We can't patch it. We can bypass it. We can rig it to fire again.
but we can't get that kind of relativistic performance. A second shot with this, we'd be lucky to hit escape velocity. It would be like throwing a rock. A very big, very expensive rock. A heavy quiet fell over the room. They had fired their silver bullet, and it had shattered the gun.
So we need a new one,
Voronova stated, her tone leaving no room for argument.
We can't build one,
Mags shot back, frustration lacing his voice.
The alloys, the microfabrication, it's centuries beyond us. We've got lucky repurposing this thing, but that converter is the heart. It's VOC-level tech.
He trailed off, and an idea, a terrible, glorious, utterly insane idea, began to form in his sleep-deprived brain. His eyes went wide. He typed frantically on his console, cross-referencing the damage reports with the scavenged VOC technical data they'd pulled from Tal's lost, dying data packet. His keystrokes were a rapid-fire percussion on the console.
Wait a minute, he muttered. Wait just a goddamn minute.
He brought up the schematics of a VOC cruiser. He zoomed in on the power distribution network.
Their systems are modular, redundant, elegant.
He said the lost word like it was a disease.
They build their ships out of standardized components.
Voronova saw where he was going.
You are saying they have spares?
I'm saying,
Mads said, a manic grin spreading across his face,
that there's only one place in this quadrant to get a component that robust, from the people who built the ships we just blew up.
He pulled up a star chart, highlighting a small, insignificant point in the asteroid belt.
A VOC salvage and repair outpost, a scrapyard for their damaged ships from other, more civilized conflicts. According to their own comms chatter, it's lightly defended, a logistical afterthought.
He looked up at Voronova, his eyes burning with a terrifying light.
It's our only chance. We need to go shopping.
Hours before the heist, the operations center was a hive of activity. Voronova coordinated diversionary tactics. Gibbert ran final diagnostics on the Scarlet Halo, and the commando team geared up. Mads, however, was not on the main floor. He sat alone in his small, cluttered office, a glorified closet overflowing with databanks and scavenged parts. On one screen, the plan for the outpost raid was displayed in stark tactical overlays. He stared at it, but his focus was elsewhere. In his hands, he held a second, smaller datapad. Voronova entered without a sound, holding 2 mugs of the familiar sludgy coffee. She placed one on the only clear corner of his desk.
You've been staring at that plan for an hour. If you burn a hole in it, you'll have to brief the team from memory.
He startled, quickly trying to slide the datapad under a pile of printouts. She raised a single, unimpressed eyebrow.
What is it?
He sighed, the fight going out of him. Defeated, he showed her the screen. The image was not a weapon schematic. The image was not a tactical analysis. It was a complex, beautifully intricate blueprint for a self-tuning acoustic violin. Every curve, every joint, every resonant frequency was calculated to perfection.
It was a side project before all this,
he murmured, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it.
Something to build that doesn't explode. Something that just makes a nice sound.
Voronova looked from the elegant blueprint to his tired, haunted face. She saw past the sarcasm, past the frantic genius, to the man who just wanted to build something beautiful in a universe that kept demanding he build weapons.
Good,
she said, her voice quiet but firm.
The galaxy could use more nice sounds.
The brief, unexpected moment of quiet hung between them, a fragile bubble of peace in the heart of the storm. It was a reminder of the world they were fighting to reclaim, a world where a person could waste their brilliance on something as gloriously useless as a perfect violin. The journey to the asteroid belt was long, quiet, and crushingly boring. For Gibbert, this was a form of torture. On the 3rd day, he tried to heat a nutrient paste packet in the Scarlet Halo's galley. The ship was not a warship. It was a reinforced asteroid tug, a flying tow truck with oversized grappling arms and an engine that valued torque over speed. Its amenities were an afterthought. The microwave sparked violently, belched a puff of acrid smoke, and died. "Damn it, Mads!" Gibbert's voice yelled over the internal comm, echoing through the small ship. "This piece of junk is a fire hazard! I nearly flash-fried my lunch!" Mads' voice crackled back from the makeshift engineering station he'd set up in the cargo bay. "If you stopped trying to cook foil-lined packets in a 20-year-old radiation emitter, maybe you wouldn't keep overloading the galley's power relay, you absolute wrench. Read the instructions!" "Instructions are for people who don't know what they're doing," Gibbet retorted. "Clearly," Mad snapped back. Later, as they approached the target zone, Gibbert's boredom found a more productive outlet. The plan was one of pure human pragmatism, a strategy so dumb it looped all the way around to being brilliant. He spent hours at the helm, playing a game of cosmic billiards. Using the ship's powerful tractor beam and engine burns, he identified a dozen massive iron-rich asteroids. He gave them a series of carefully calculated nudges, gentle shoves that altered their orbits just enough. He put them into slow, intersecting, and seemingly random paths that would, in several hours, all converge on the Vok outpost at the same time. The outpost's sophisticated point defense systems were programmed to detect high-velocity projectiles and ships with active engine signatures. They were designed to stop torpedoes and fighters. They would completely ignore a dozen multi-ton rocks drifting in at a leisurely, non-threatening crawl. "It's not about speed," Gibbert explained over the comm to the commando team leader, a stoic woman named Sergeant Taggart. "It's about inevitability. They're looking for a bullet. They're not going to see the avalanche until their windows start breaking." As the first of the asteroids began its final, silent descent, the heist began. The slow, ponderous impact against the station's outer hull was less of an attack and more of a cosmic fender-bender. Alarms blared, but they were proximity and collision alerts, not combat warnings. Confusion, not readiness, spread through the outpost. As a second, larger asteroid crunched into a docking pylon, Gibbert brought the Scarlet Halo in low and fast, using the chaos as cover. They docked at a deserted cargo bay, the emergency shutters half-closed. Mad's team stormed the corridors. They moved fast, a stark contrast to the Vok's unhurried, almost bored response to what they perceived as an industrial accident. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a squad of Vok guards in sleek, elegant powered armor. Their plasma rifles hummed, charging to fire. Mads, who was lagging slightly behind the commandos, shoved a bulky, horrifyingly jury-rigged device forward. It was a metal frame holding the magnetron and capacitor bank from the ship's galley microwave, crudely bolted to a high-discharge military power pack and held together with a truly heroic amount of reactor sealant putty, still tacky to the touch. "Fire in the hole!" he yelled and triggered it. The device let out a deafening whong and a flash of greasy, unfocused electromagnetic energy. The lights in the corridor flickered violently. A backlash of energy zapped Taggart's glove, making her yelp and shake her scorched hand. But the weapon worked. The delicate networked circuits in the Vok weapons and armor fizzled and died. The humming of their rifles cut out. The power resistance in their armor went dead. Suddenly, they were just aliens trapped in very heavy, very shiny metal coffins. The commandos, armed with simple, low-tech stun batons, moved in and took them down with brutal efficiency. "See?" Mads said, kicking one of the dead plasma rifles. "Told you it was a fire hazard." They found the storage bay easily. It was a cathedral of alien technology, stacked high with gleaming replacement parts. The power converters were massive, obelisk-like devices, humming with contained energy. Getting one to the ship required a cargo lifter. The lifter, naturally, was locked down by a glowing, complex Vok security panel, its holographic interface shifting through intricate geometric patterns. Mads looked at the panel for a solid 2 seconds. He scoffed. "Right, like I have time for a puzzle." He pulled a heavy, rust-stained crowbar from his tool belt and ripped the entire panel off the wall with a screech of tortured metal. The wiring beneath was exposed. It was a thing of beauty, clean, perfectly color-coded, an engineer's dream compared to the chaotic rat's nest he was used to.
"Oh, that's just lovely,"
he said with genuine appreciation. Using a pair of scarred, oil-stained pliers from his pocket, he stripped two of the main power conduits and, with a casual flick of the wrist, sparked them together. The cargo lifter hummed to life.
"All right, people, load her up," Taggart ordered. "We're on the clock."
As the team guided the priceless converter onto the lifter's anti-grav plate, the station's real alarms finally began to shriek, a piercing, aggressive sound that meant they had finally, truly been discovered. The escape was a mad dash through the very chaos they had created. Vok patrol ships, now fully alerted and furious, swarmed from their berths. Gibbert pushed the Scarlet Halo, a ship built for pulling, not running, to its absolute breaking point. He flew like a demon. He weaved through the tumbling asteroids he himself had set in motion. He used them as cover, ducking behind a massive chunk of iron to avoid a volley of plasma fire, then using his tractor beam to fling a smaller rock into the path of the pursuer. A plasma bolt sheared past their cockpit, vaporizing asteroid and peppering their hull with superheated shrapnel. The whole ship shuddered from a sharp impact. An alarm screamed from the cargo bay. "The converter's magnetic containment is fluctuating!" a commando yelled over the comm. "It's leaking hard radiation back here!" The flight back to Europa became a new kind of hell. Mads had to perform a terrifying zero-G emergency repair inside the irradiated cargo hold. Clad in a bulky, lead-lined EVA suit, he clung to the side of the stolen device, which pulsed with dangerous energy, while Gibbert dodged enemy fire and chunks of rock. The ship bucked and twisted around him, but Mads' hands were steady as he rerouted the damaged circuits. He managed to stabilize the containment field just as Gibbert found a clear path and slammed the button for the jump drive, leaving the Vok outpost in a state of confused, asteroid-battered disarray. Back in the relative safety of the Chimera base, a new kind of race began. Mads, running on nothing but fumes and Voranova's steady supply of coffee, worked feverishly to integrate the superior Vok power converter into their Frankenstein's monster of a gun. The alien tech was so efficient, so elegantly designed, that it interfaced with their chaotic brute force systems better than he'd ever dared to imagine. It was like plugging a supercomputer into a wood-burning stove, and somehow it worked.
"Recharge time is cut from days to hours,"
he announced to Voronova, his voice thick with exhaustion and triumph.
"We can fire again. We can fire better."
The victory was short-lived. Voronova pulled him from his engineering console to the main strategic map.
"Your timing is impeccable, Mads,"
she said, her voice devoid of warmth.
"New intelligence just arrived through the long-range sensor network."
On the screen, a new fleet of icons appeared at the edge of the system. Far more than before. A second, larger Vok fleet. A punishment fleet.
"This one is led by a new matriarch,"
Voronova continued, zooming in on the lead ship's designation.
"Salacia. And according to the chatter, she's unlike Tal. She's not arrogant. She's cunning. She's studied the recording of the Europa Gambit. She's learned from his mistake."
The icons began to spread out, forming a wide, sweeping net that would cover multiple attack vectors. They did not cluster. They prepared to bombard Earth from every direction at once.
"She's not giving us a single target,"
Voronova said, the terrible finality of the statement hanging in the air.
"Chimera's single-shot, single-direction capability is now strategically useless."
Mads stared at the strategic map, at the unwinnable web of enemy ships. The exuberant energy in the operations center evaporated, replaced by the cold, heavy weight of impending doom. He felt the eyes of the crew on him, waiting for another miracle. He didn't have one.
"We can't hit them all,"
Voronova said, voicing the obvious.
"Even if we could get them to cluster, they'd see us coming. Salacia will be scanning for any kind of large-scale construction, any massive energy signature. She won't repeat Tal's mistake."
Mad's exhausted brain fired on all cylinders, running calculations, discarding scenarios. He looked at the map, at the enemy fleet, at Earth, at their one useless gun on Europa. Then he looked further out, at the debris field from Tull's destroyed fleet, now drifting in a wide, messy orbit near Saturn. A manic, sleep-deprived, utterly terrifying look entered his eyes. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen.
"She's not looking for what we're building,"
he whispered, the idea taking shape. He looked at Voronova.
"Saturn's rings. They're the best sensor jammer in the entire system. All that ice, rock, radiation. It's a nightmare of false positives."
His voice grew stronger, faster.
"Celestia's looking for a battleship. She's looking for another chimera. She's not looking for a bunch of junk haulers playing with scrap metal in a cosmic junkyard."
The new plan was utterly beautiful, suicidally insane, even for him.
"We'll use every ship we have left. We'll haul salvaged mining launchers, tractor beam emitters, anything that can throw a rock into those rings. We'll take the dense tungsten plating from the wreckage of Tull's fleet. We'll move beyond a single gun,"
he said, a wild grin spreading across his face.
"We're going to build 1,000. We're going to build a minefield, a system-wide death trap made of kinetic cannons."
It was a frantic, desperate race against time. Every functioning ship humanity had left in the outer system was mobilized. Cargo haulers, asteroid miners, even Gibbert's battered Scarlet Halo. They worked in the shadow of Saturn, a silent, frantic construction project hidden within the glorious chaos of its rings. Crews in shielded worksuits mounted the small, crude, magnetically accelerated launchers onto asteroids, bolting them directly into the rock and ice. They used low-energy tools that generated minimal heat signatures, their work camouflaged by the natural sensor clutter. It was dangerous, ugly work, a stark contrast to the elegant warships they prepared to ambush. They built a death trap from their own enemies' corpses. While Mad's insane project took shape in the outer system, Voronova briefed the commanders of Earth's meager defense fleet, the last handful of USDF destroyers and frigates. Their mission was stark and horrifying.
"You will not win,"
she told their grim faces over a secure channel.
"You are not expected to survive. Your mission is to be the bait. You will engage Matriarch Celestia's fleet head-on. You will be loud. You will be aggressive. You will be so unbelievably, suicidally barbaric that she cannot possibly look away. You will keep her eyes pointed firmly at Earth and away from Saturn. You are buying us time."
There was no hesitation. On every screen, a dozen captains nodded in solemn acceptance of their fate. The remaining USDF ships met the lead elements of Matriarch Celestia's fleet near Mars. They were hopelessly outgunned, a handful of rowboats against a fleet of aircraft carriers. But they fought to provoke. They flew with a kind of glorious, defiant madness. A USDF frigate, shields failing, rammed a Vok cruiser at full impulse, the resulting explosion taking both ships out. A squadron of destroyers executed a point-blank missile barrage, overwhelming a single target's defenses through sheer bloody-minded proximity before being vaporized by return fire. Their tactics were brutal, dishonorable, and shockingly effective at one thing: enraging Matriarch Celestia. From the bridge of her flagship, the Sun Eater, Celestia watched the primitives throw their lives away with disgust. Their tactics had no elegance, no strategy. It was the flailing of a dying animal. Overconfident in her numbers and infuriated by their insolence, she took the bait. She ordered her fleet to push forward aggressively, to crush the pathetic resistance in one overwhelming wave. She funneled her ships directly into the pre-planned corridor, a seemingly clear path that led straight through Saturn's rings. The final communication from the USDF flagship, the Moat, was not a scream of terror. It was a calm, steady voice cutting through the battle static, a message for Voronova on Europa.
"They're in position. For Sol."
Then the signal went dead. From her command post on Europa, Commander Izoida Voronova watched the lost friendly signal blink out. She stood motionless for a moment, a silent tribute to the sacrifice. Then she took a deep breath, her face a mask of cold steel. She leaned into her comms microphone. Her voice was ice. Execute! All at once, across thousands of kilometers of Saturn's rings, hundreds of hidden, networked coil guns fired. It was not a single elegant shot. It was a shotgun blast the size of a planet. A biblical storm of tungsten spikes scavenged from the hulls of the first Vok fleet, ripped through the rings. They came from above, from below, from both sides. There was no arrangement that could defend against it. The Vok shields, still tuned for high-energy attacks and anticipating a frontal assault, were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of simultaneous kinetic impacts from hundreds of vectors. Hulls designed for the vacuum of space were shredded by hypervelocity scrap metal. Engines were punctured. The elegant Vok formation descended into a panic-stricken demolition derby amid the ice and rock of the rings, their advanced technology failing them utterly against a hailstorm of their own recycled plating. As Matriarch Salatia's heavily damaged flagship, the Sun Eater, tried to reverse course, to claw its way out of the maelstrom of shrapnel and shattered ships, Mads leaned into his console back on Europa. The main Chimera coil gun was fully charged. The new Vok converter hummed with stable, beautiful, terrifying power. On his screen, he had a clear, direct shot at the Vok dreadnought. He glanced at the young comms officer, Benning.
Do you have it?
The officer, sweating but grinning with feral triumph, gave him a sharp nod. Back door's wide open, sir. System-wide. We're piggybacking on the sympathetic comm code. They never knew we were listening. Mads keyed the comm, hijacking the very frequency Tull had used to deliver his ultimatum. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the solar system, broadcast into the bridges of every surviving terrified Vok ship. He spoke directly to the ghost of Sovereign Tull and to the entire galaxy.
Correction,
he said.
We have one.
He fired. The projectile crossed the vast distance in minutes, a silent, avenging angel of kinetic death. It impacted the Sun Eater. The Vok dreadnought and everything within a 50-kilometer radius was vaporized in a flash of pure energy, a new, temporary, and deeply satisfying star in the night sky. Silence reigned. The strategic map, once a terrifying sea of red, was now a beautiful, calming green. The remnants of the Vok punishment fleet, broken, terrified, and utterly defeated, were in full panicked retreat. They broadcast desperate, incoherent warnings to their homeworld about the primitive, savage demons of Sol. In the Chimera Operations Center, the exhausted crew stared at the screens, disbelief warring with elation. Then, slowly, a single person began to clap. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in a ragged, cathartic cheer that was more of a collective sob of relief. As the celebration swelled around them, Voronova walked to the main strategic map. Her hand came to rest on the screen over the empty space where the icons for the USDF fleet, the ships that had bought them this chance, had vanished forever. Mads came to stand beside her. No words were needed. He saw the grief behind her stoic mask, and she saw the weight of his creation on his shoulders. The victory was total, but the cost was real, and it would never be forgotten. The cheering crowd slowly subsided into a determined buzz of activity as crews began damage assessments and system checks. A crackle came over the main comms. It was Gibbert. His voice buzzed with adrenaline and pure unadulterated joy. So that was fun. The Scarlet Halo is mostly not on fire. Minor detail. First round's on me when we get home, people. Mads slumped back into his command chair, a real bone-weary smile finally spreading across his face. He watched the lost enemy signal fade from the system, disappearing into the vast emptiness between the stars. The war was far from over, but the battle for Sol was. And the galaxy now knew what happened when you cornered a species in its own home. They learned what happened when you cataloged their deficiencies. You forced them to invent solutions from ingenuity, desperation, and the wreckage of your own arrogance.